I have no idea what to say about this Lakers team, but I know somebody who can help me figure this thing out is the undefeated's Marc Spears joining the Rich Eisen show. And look, Marc, I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm asking people. I'm trying to find my insiders. I lean on you because this wasn't what we expected before the season started. 19 games left, and I still can't figure out the Lakers.
Well, maybe our expectations were too high. Like if you go look at Vegas and the odds, and I don't know if you remember this, they had this were tied, I think, with Boston for the second best odds to win the title, not just go to the championship. I mean, make the playoffs,
Right.
win the title behind the Warriors. So perhaps Vegas was fooling everybody a little bit to get some bets in, but. You know, this team has one all-star, one superstar, and had a lot of young guys that had a lot of growing up to do. So, you know, I always kind of felt like it was a challenge to make it to the playoffs. But when you add LeBron James in the roster, I think everybody just assumed that anything was possible.
But when you look at the Western Conference and LeBron coming over to the Western Conference, look, you understand that there's going to be some tough games with the OKC, the Warriors, Denver Nuggets, Portland. But when you lose to the Phoenix Suns, the worst team in the NBA, Marc, that's inexcusable. To me, that tells me there's something going on inside of that locker room, whether it's the coaching staff to the players, guys not believing, and you read those comments after, the players don't know how to figure it out. So what's there next to do?
Yeah, I mean, and it's not just the Suns. They've lost to a lot of bad teams.
Right.
And if they just win those games against the bad teams, they're in playoff position. I mean, we could blame youth. Maybe Lonzo is more important than we thought. The New Orleans hangover. You know, there's a lot of things, but ultimately there's also a chemistry deal there as well. I remember when I covered the Celtics in 2007-8, the year they won a title, there was a lot of new people involved. Kevin Garnett arrived. Ray Allen arrived. And if you talk to Ray and Paul and KG, what really helped them was going to London, going to Italy, and getting camaraderie and building a teamwork and learning about unselfishness, you know, away from America, like being forced to be together. And I thought that, you know, I talked to Rondo about that early in the season. He said he wished that this team had that kind of opportunity to grow together and get to know each other better because obviously the chemistry is horrible. There's a lot of fingers to be pointed, which I think that's where a lot of the frustration is, like, what is the real reason? But, you know, ultimately when you have a LeBron James on your team, you know, the finger probably is going to have to be pointed at him because some people, you know, view him as the best player to ever play in the world ever. He's been to 8 straight finals, and I think he hasn't missed the playoffs since 2004. So just with him alone, the expectation is that the rest of the guys would pick up their game and grow with him being there, but such hasn't been the case.
Senior NBA writer for The Undefeated, Marc Spears, joining the Rich Eisen show. Kirk Morrison filling in for Rich. But I think, Marc, what happens is so many things that LeBron James is involved in before he got to Los Angeles. And now since he's been in Los Angeles, all these new opportunities keep popping up, and his hands seem to be in everything. And in reading your piece from the other day on The Undefeated about Kobe Bryant, Kobe was all in on basketball, and he waited till he retired to get into movies and film and all the different endeavors now that he's a part of. When you look at LeBron James and what he's doing, and now you see that his basketball team seems to be suffering, does that also factor into what a lot of people are kind of maybe upset about or will use as a blame to put on LeBron?
I mean, but Curry, he averaging 27, 9, and 8.
But they're not in the playoffs, Marc.
I mean, he could do that. I mean, he could go act it and give you that. I mean, his play has still been great, right? So I think that might be just an excuse that people are using. but he's still balling. I could see if he was averaging 19 and 4-4, something like that.
Right.
But if there is somebody that could like put all this stuff on his plate and still perform, it's him. Regardless to whether he's filming Space Jam or this, that, and the third, I don't know that really matters. I think hey man, you know LA and you know how big the press conference is in LA. Jim Hill asking the first question in LA.
Right.
Like I think that in hindsight, LeBron probably should have, done the LA tradition, do the press conference, get the city to get to know him more instead of not doing anything until training camp. And I also think it would be good for him to go to South Central, go to East LA, maybe do a lot of the great things that he does. Perhaps do that more in the LA community so they could get to know him a little better. Because I don't like he's said to some of the reporters there, well, you guys don't really know me. I think it would be good for them to get to know him more, but he's become such a big star. Perhaps that's kind of gone by the wayside. But I won't use his moonlighting as an excuse because his numbers are still really great.
But what about the big star over in Boston, a former teammate of LeBron James and Kyrie Irving, talking about, the embracing of a city. Boston seemed to embrace Kyrie. Now, he didn't play in the playoffs, or he wasn't a part of that run all the way to one game before the the NBA Finals that they lost to LeBron James. But yet, before the season started, it's, hey, I want to be a Celtic if you have me. And now we look at where they're at right now, this point in the season, and it doesn't seem like he wants to be there, nor does the team seem like they want to be on the same page. What's going on in Boston?
Well, they, with their struggles and with Kyrie speaking out, I'm sure some of those guys are saying, hey, we won without him last year. We could do that. We could do better without him. So I'm sure that's another place. That is another place where the chemistry issues are there. And, I mentioned having worked in Boston before. Mm-hmm. I really wish Kyrie didn't make that promise. Mm-hmm. He didn't have to, And that's a city where if you're going to make a promise somewhere and they expect it to happen, that certainly is one of those places. There's a lot of pride there. There's a lot of ego there. There's a lot of titles there. So, there was really no reason for Kyrie to say, I'm coming back. Will you guys have me? And then changing his mind. He kind of made his bed in a fashion that could come back and bite him. And then you've heard the talk about him maybe going to New York. Can you imagine him going back to Boston in next year form? And how crazy that game would be. I mean, this is a franchise who threw rocks at the Lakers bus after beating the Lakers in a championship in 2008. It could be dare I say, a somewhat dangerous situation for him to come back to Boston. Time will tell, but it seems more and more that the tide is leaning towards him departing from a place that he probably shouldn't have promised in the first place.
Senior NBA writer for the undefeated Marc Spears joining the Rich Eisen show. Kirk Morrison in for Rich. So how do they fix it though, Mark? Like, because the one thing about the difference between the Lakers and the Celtics are that Boston is actually right now in the playoffs, or the 5th seed in the East, that they'll be playing, but it's hard to see them making any movement or scaring anybody when it seems like they're not collectively together as a unit.
I mean, it's embarrassing that they're the 5th seed. They have the talent to be number 1. They have the most talent in the Eastern Conference. Gordon Hayward hasn't lived up to what he was before he was injured. Chemistry's bad. Has Jason Tatum really taken a step forward? I don't know. I mean, kind of going back to your Lakers, right. I think the Pelicans should have made that move, but they appear to be so upset at the Lakers that there was no way that they were going to make that trade. If they're waiting on Tatum, I don't know that I agree that Tatum alone is better than getting Ingram, Kuzma, Ball, and perhaps Hart and 2 firsts. I mean, the Lakers offered, I think the Lakers offered the Pelicans a Herschel Walker trade for Anthony Davis,
Right.
and it might have been a blessing in disguise that trade didn't go down, despite how bad things look right now.
But now, when you talk about the play on the court now, not just the drama off of it, though, Mark, you're looking at Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kawhi Leonard. I think James Harden, another outstanding game last night, another 40-plus point game for him, and then Paul George as well. When it comes down to the MVP, Harden already the reigning MVP. Kind of who's your front runner right now? Is it going to go to a team with the best player on the best team in the NBA, or could a guy like Paul George sneak up to get it? Could Kawhi Leonard get up? Is it going to go to the top team?
I'm big on record,
right?
And you know, not just stats, but record too. And to me, right now, Giannis is far and above the MVP of the league. Bucks have, I believe, the best record in the league right now, and he's playing amazing. You know, that's not to say that James Harden isn't playing well, but you know, their record's not the best in the West, and they're not even top three. You know, Paul George is probably a better candidate than, you know, he's getting credit for. But, I mean, some more wins by the Thunder, maybe sneaking up into that 2 spot would help his cause right now. But unless the Bucks do a downward spiral, I'm expecting Giannis to get the MVP award, and he really wants it too.
Senior NBA writer for the Undefeated, Marc Spears. A couple more before I let you go, Mark. The one thing that over the last, I guess, couple days or last couple weeks that I've seen in watching the NBA is that obviously there's big games and there's just games that people kind of watch from night to night. But we've seen some absolutely, I don't want to call them horrendous, but bad calls by the officials. We saw last night that Trae Young got ejected in the third quarter for staring down a player that they call taunting. And then we've seen players now tweet at NBA officials. How is that going over with the league office that players are trying to figure out, why am I getting, I think the call on Saturday night on Josh Hart against DeAndre Ayton, he's saying, hey, what did I do wrong? Is that good for the league that players can kind of question the call by tweeting at them or going at the officials? Is that what Adam Silver, is that something that they're okay with?
Can't be. And it's also, I think, a message of there's a lot of new referees now. When you watch games, Kirk, how many of these guys you recognize?
Not many.
I mean, I don't know how close you're paying attention.
Right.
But, you know, all the really, really great referees are gone.
Right.
Like now, like Zach Zarba's like a veteran referee in this league. The Joey Crawfords, the Crawfords of the world, and the Bavettas, and, you know, all those guys are gone. They've not only lost some veteran referees that were really, really good, Javi, you know, but if you watch closely on some of the top basketball games in college, you'll see former NBA refs there. I think a lot of the veterans retired because, one, they're getting old, but I think a majority of it is they're tired of all the cameras being on them, everything being judged in slow motion. Just there's so much pressure being an NBA ref. It's a lot of very thankless job, although they get paid really well. So a lot of the old heads are gone, and a lot of these new young guys are trying to establish themselves in the league and make the presence known instead of just roughing the games. Like the one with Trae Young yesterday was just ridiculous. I mean, trash talking is part of the game. Right. Even Reggie Miller tweeted about that. It's just, you know, I was at a game in the G League showcase, and there was a referee who called a technical on a player for taunting. And it was a player who was playing really, really well. And NBA teams were, like, getting a chance to see him during the showcase, former NBA player, and his second tech kicked him out of the game when he was in the middle of a hot streak. And you just felt like the whole enthusiasm of the game just went out the door, man, and everybody kind of looking at the ref like, why'd you do that? You know, so another thing I think a lot of these young refs need to do is just take a step back and look at that these people are here to watch the players play and not some of the referees' refs.
Yeah. I hear you, Mark. Hey, but I'm still watching, though. But still, I want to see Trae Young stay in the game. You know what I mean? Don't do that to me, refs. Hey, Mark, appreciate the time, man, always.
All right, town business.
Sound good. Tell business. That's Marc Spears, senior NBA writer of The Undefeated.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.